Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows, Season 2, Episode 7. What is the name of this episode? On the Run, right. So this episode is the one where Laszlo pretends to be somebody else named Jackie Daytona from Tucson, Arizona. It's a classic, I think. We will all look back and see this one as a classic. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. It's really funny. Max commissioned all of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and I just finished that, and I saw his name on the schedule again, and I had forgotten he commissioned this, and I was like, I thought I was done with Full Metal. What's going on? But no, Max was just like, all right, now we're done with that, and I'm going to immediately start commissioning another thing. He commissioned the remainder of this season, and he did it in bulk, but it won't start. The bulk run won't quite start until the 20th. And then we are going to be getting one a week. So it'll be a lot more steady after that, which will be great because I really, really enjoy this show. And it's the kind of show that started to get enough attention that there's a danger of being spoiled when a new episode drops now, because there's like AV Club articles and stuff that go up about it. And this, I got a tiny bit spoiled for, and it's not even really spoiled, but I did see something about Laszlo pretending to be somebody named Jackie Daytona. But out of context, it just seemed like a role play thing for some joke within the show. It didn't feel like he literally got up, left, and set up a totally different life. And that for me is, I'm so glad that I wasn't spoiled on that part, because the fact that he just decides that he's going to go on the lam makes it all the more fantastic, especially once you find out at the end that he's only been gone like a week, when it feels like it's been 6 months probably. And I think what I love the most about the fact that it's been only a week is the fact that he has managed to like completely take over this town through sheer force of personality in terms of being like a beloved local figure. And the fact that that happened so quickly is such a good joke, because you just have an idea in your head of how long it has been, especially because Nadja is like freaking out. So it does seem like she thinks he could be dead, you know? So Martin Looney says this is actually episode 6. Sorry to be that guy. Sorry to be that girl who runs the show and gets the fucking episode number wrong. Not your fault, Martin. I think I was reading, because I have a second monitor now, guys. I'm super fancy. So I have the Hulu window open in the second monitor, and I'm realizing that the bottom right is what I was reading, but that's the up next. So I started to say The Return, because that's the title of the next episode. And I stopped and I was like, that doesn't sound right, which is why I had to be like, what is this called again? So let's see. Oh, hi, Asher. Asher's here. Jan is here. Jackie Daytona, the regular human bartender. Martin says, I need to go back and watch that. I just want to watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood on my own first. It is a ride. Let me tell you, it's a really well put together show. There's parts at the end that I felt like didn't quite get the explanations they should have for how crazy shit goes, but recommended. Jackie Daytona. Matt Berry is a treasure. Okay, so I want to talk about Matt Berry real quick for a second, because, so, 2 things. 1, there was a thread on Twitter the other day where somebody was complaining about how Matt Berry isn't actually that good because he always plays the same character. First of all, absolutely not. I mean, does he use some of the same inflections and like bombastic characterization? Sure. Same character? No. And secondly, even if he did, it's so good I don't care. You know? Like, there are some comedians that do just kind of bring a particular sort of energy to the projects that they work on. And there is nothing wrong with having a certain brand associated. You know, like, it's sort of like Jason Mantzoukas. He shows up in anything and you're like, okay, he's going to be the fucking unhinged one. He's going to be the guy that's maybe committed a few murders, that's definitely on drugs. Like, he is always the wild card. And Matt Berry, maybe he has that same thing going on, but that doesn't make him not good at what he does. He's got flawless comedic delivery and timing. And I just can't, I just can't like stand to hear anybody talk shit about comedians who have honed a particular thing. I think it's disrespectful. Secondly, I cannot tell you, in the groups that I am in various places on the internet, a lot of them are on Facebook, that are woman-centric, how many women want to fuck Matt Berry. It is wild. They are thirsty. And it is always so funny to me because I see these like posts going around that guys share about how, like, you know, women just want a 6-pack and like a mansion, and that's all they're looking for in a man. And maybe Matt Berry is rich. It's really surprising sometimes how little certain people get paid for television, but we'll say he's probably rich. I am not thinking that's the draw for any of the ladies that I am around. That is certainly not it. It is the adorable chipmunk-like face and the humor. And honestly, relatable, because there are so many men that I would never have looked twice at. And then they crack a really clever joke, and I just am dead in the water. Like, there is no way I am not going to turn around and be like, what's up? That is exactly what happened with Brendan, and that is what happened with Owen. It is just, humor will cut through all of the static in my head and make me go, who's that? So I just wanted to say that right out of the gate, because I couldn't stand seeing some of the shade that was being thrown at him. I got really mad about it. So let's start off this episode, which begins with the location of a bunch of bodies that have been buried on the property without really any consideration for the long-term damage that they might do to the structure of the integrity of the structure of the earth. So it's turning into sinkholes because of the decomposition of cadavers, as we see when people begin to sink up to their waist. There's a fucking like Amazon delivery driver or something who just collapses into one. And actually, Martin, who is in the chat, had said earlier that they were going to school for civil and environmental engineering. And I'm like, Martin, is this real? Would a bunch of like bodies being buried not well and decomposing result in sinkholes? You know about engineering. Tell me if this is a real thing. And so what they're doing is, like, Guillermo, of course, is dead ass serious about this because it's like a genuine safety hazard. But then everybody else is sort of treating it like it's a funny game. So they're running around and they're like competing to see who can find the most bodies and just spraying an X on the ground with spray paint when they locate them. And I'm assuming what Guillermo is going to have to do is exhume all of these bodies and find a different disposal method, which I don't know what that would even look like. Maybe burning. They really should invest in like a basement furnace, you know, something that can really bring things down to fine ash. Because if you try to just burn things, and I've watched enough true crime and listened to enough podcasts on true crime. I say enough. I listened to one and it snapped and that's it. But still, that's enough. Most fires don't burn hot enough to completely get rid of like all human remains. You need something that is specialized for that. They have enough they have enough bodies to deal with. That feels like it would just make financial sense. Martin says, unfortunately, yes. So note to all of you out there, all of you multi-murderers, don't bury them like this. Be a little bit more careful about it. So yeah, we are in the midst of like looking for these bodies when a dude drops down onto their lawn extremely dramatically after throwing a dagger, by the way. And this is so great. It turns out to be Mark Hamill. And I can't remember this character's name, if anybody wants to refresh me. But he is... What they do here is one of my favorite bits, which is when somebody is obsessed with a person who did them wrong. And they view that person in sort of the, like, under the lens of them being an arch enemy somehow. Or somebody that this person, like, they just believe if I encounter them, it's going to be a thing. And then it turns out that Laszlo doesn't even recognize this dude at all. He reveals himself really dramatically with his little cape that he takes his hood down. And he honestly has got a pretty, like, badass look to him. They've done this, like, thing where he oddly has a combination look of almost a little bit of a sad sack, but also you can see, like, the edges of where the badass used to be. And, oh my god, that's right. Martin says his name is Jim the Vampire. I don't know how I forgot about that. Y'all, I swear to God, this show. So yeah, he reveals himself and says, hello, Laszlo, with this like fucking high drama. And Laszlo literally just says hello. And it's a whole like underwhelming moment. He says, like, you don't remember what went down in California. I rented you a guest room. And then we find out that what Laszlo thought he was going to do was meet the devil at a crossroads and learn how to become a good guitarist. But he was misinformed about where the crossroads was. So he went to California when in fact he should have gone to Mississippi. And this dude says, you remember I rented you a room in my beach house in San Diego, and you skipped out without paying me the last month's rent and the security deposit. Which, really, sir, that sounds like it's on you. Because if it's a deposit, you get that before somebody moves in. I wish we had more, like, details about this. But it is... The overall impression I get from this guy is that he is not entirely with it. So I am not surprised that in letting somebody, like, stay on his property, he would not take the precautions that he should. And Laszlo says that he didn't pay because when he got there, he says, if I remember correctly, I walked into the John and someone had left a huge floater. I don't know if that's supposed to mean that he just didn't stay there. Like, he came in, saw the state the bathroom was in, and was like, never mind, bye. Or he did stay there, but he just thought the fact that somebody had taken a shit before he got there meant he shouldn't have to pay. But either way, you are very wrong also, Laszlo. I don't know what you're thinking here, but that's not how any of this works. So he says, I have spent 167 years searching for you, and now satisfaction will be mine. And I should mention, before he, like, narrows it down and makes it clear he's here for Laszlo, he has a kind of go-round with everybody who is wondering if he is here for them, except for Guillermo, who does not ever think this guy is here for him. But that doesn't keep Nandor from suggesting this guy kill Guillermo instead of himself. So another nail in his coffin, so to speak, because I just feel like everything is building up here for Guillermo to finally be fucking done and ready to bounce on this whole crew. I don't know how much more it's going to take, but he has clearly gotten to a point where he's starting to be like, right. I've been like very patient and I'm starting to see all the signs finally. And that's been going on for a few episodes. Either he's just going to accept that this is how his life is and he's never going to become a vampire, or he's going to hit a breaking point and be like, bye, can't. So yeah, he says, you'll repay me now or you will pay with your life, the money or a duel. And of course, absolutely everybody is telling him just fucking pay the money. I would have loved to hear how much he owed. I can't remember if he even says that, but I'm assuming since it took 167 years, this guy doesn't seem like the type to add interest. But again, he just doesn't seem like super bright. So I'm going to say that he would just try and get the same like $25 that he was owed in the first place, you know? So Laszlo is like, oh my God. Martin says, I love how as soon as Guillermo hears Jim is here for Laszlo, he just shrugs and puts his steak away. I didn't even catch that. I'm going to rewind a little bit here. I'm so excited to have two monitors, guys. This makes it all so much fun. But I really enjoy that Laszlo fools us into thinking as well that he is going to go down fighting. And I say go down fighting. I don't for a moment think that he would like be losing a fight on his own show to the point that he dies. But he squares up in a way that I felt very confident about. And then he just bounces and it's so quick. And I just was caught off guard for a moment. I thought that he was doing some weird kind of an attack of a type that was just going to be kind of against the rules, like he was cheating. I didn't even realize that he was literally just running away. And I should have, because Laszlo is just not really the type for that kind of confrontation when it feels like there's any risk at all that he's not going to come out on top. I say this with the memory of him beating up the bikers who did not deserve it. So, yeah, he bounces and this dude Jim tries to run after him and falls into one of the body pits that's got like 3 bodies in it, apparently. And then we go to this like motel. I think it's called the Lafayette Motel. Fayette Fields Motel. And it turns out Laszlo has like a go bag here. It is an impenetrable disguise, as he puts it. A pair of blue jeans and a toothpick with which he says he is unrecognizable. And it's such a great joke because he actually turns out to be unrecognizable to the man looking for him. I can't tell if this later on, when he's doing like a role play in the bedroom with Nadja, he puts the toothpick in and she's playing along that he seems like a different person. But I can't tell if the joke is supposed to be that vampires in general are that bad at like seeing the difference between human beings, or if it's supposed to be that Jim specifically is such a goober that this worked on him. I think it's the second one, but either way, it really is like some good payoff. I enjoyed this so much. So he gets out this little like quill and parchment and a bottle of ink and writes this goodbye letter to Nadja, which we don't actually hear whether or not she got this letter. And considering that it has only been a week, it wouldn't be unreasonable if he mailed this right now for her to not have gotten it yet. I'd like to think that maybe it arrives like the day after he got home And she's just like, what the fuck? You really were just going to leave me? But yeah, so he pulls out this box. He's got the blue jeans. I love that the toothpick is in this little like antique case. And he transforms into Jackie Daytona. And we jump ahead a little bit here to Lucky Brew's Bar and Grill. And the owner mysteriously disappeared because Laszlo killed him. And I can't tell if he bought the bar. I'm assuming he just took it over and everybody just kind of didn't ask questions about it. But because where's he getting the money? I don't really have a good idea financially of what's the deal with these vampires. That's a question that I have fairly often, actually, is they have this giant house, but it's not in like great repair. They don't really seem to understand like anything to do with modern life. So I don't know if they get what stock investments are or anything like that. And there's just not a good sense for me of whether they're like barely getting by, whether they have a huge like cash hoard that they're sitting on, or if they're just not paying for anything because they probably could get away with stealing almost everything they need. I say that. I don't know how you fake the utilities. That might be a hard one because they do seem to have running water and whatnot. But yeah, I'm sort of wondering that now. I assumed there's no way that he would have the money to do it, and I still think that he didn't pay for it, but now whether or not he could have paid for it, that I'm curious about. Martin says, if I recall correctly, Colin Robinson is responsible for the house's mortgage. Oh, I didn't remember that. Is he the only one that's paying it? That's interesting. I guess it makes a lot more sense now why they keep him around. I really do enjoy when we see him like hanging out with these locals, how he's got like his finger on the pulse of everybody's daily lives. So the first conversation we see is him greeting some guy and being like, hey, is your wife still giving you shit about that hammock? I enjoy whenever a line like that is dropped without any context, because it gives you so many options to imagine why this guy's wife is giving him a hard time. It could simply be she doesn't want a hammock in her yard because she doesn't like the way it looks, or it could be that he replaced their bed in their bedroom with hammocks and she's mad about that. You know, like it could be something completely over the top. Jan says Colin Robinson came with the house. Okay. That rings a very faint bell. So he basically is like the owner and just asked them to stay, or they made him take them. But it sounds like he's the one that's more interested in like the community aspect. So I'm guessing that he would have asked them to stay. Yeah, Laszlo is pretending to be Jackie Daytona. He is in Pennsylvania because that sounds like Transylvania, which we know sounds cool. I will tell you guys what. When I was a kid, my parents told me we were taking like a ride to Pennsylvania for something. I don't even remember what. And I thought for sure that when we got to Pennsylvania, when we got to the sign on the highway that said "Welcome to Pennsylvania," that there would be a giant statue of a pencil. And I'm not even being cute. I genuinely thought that. I was very excited to see the giant pencil. And when there was no giant pencil, I was crushed. Like, so disappointed. I remember to this day, as a 37-year-old woman, how sad I was. That's how sad I was. And I think about that now, and I'm just like, man, I really had certain ideas in my head. There's a town in Connecticut called Orange. I mean, that one pretty much you guys can imagine. Just a lot of disappointment over some things as a child. So anyway, it turns out he's really like kind of liking the life that he's living here. And he's running this bar. He has a force of personality that has made him very popular with the locals. We also see him like giving booze away a couple of times. So clearly there's that aspect of it. And he has begun to help like coach. It feels like a strong word, but he's essentially sort of a sponsor or strong supporter of the local, I think, high school girls volleyball team, the Bucks. Now, what I love about the way that this was done is the fact that if you told me out of context, Laszlo is on the lam and he begins to pour all of his energy into a girls volleyball team, I am going to assume that there is something like gross and leering and perverse and sexual about his interest in the girls volleyball team. Because girls volleyball is a sport that gets particularly sexualized. It's partially because of like the type of uniform a lot of the players are in, and just the fact that it's like women jumping up and down, which is apparently like a thing dudes are into. And I just was sort of expecting this to be like a little bit, it's super duper not at all. It is just pure wholesome support for these young girls whom he calls later athletes. And I was just so pleased that there wasn't that aspect of it, you know, because it didn't, what's so astonishing to me anytime that I like cover something and things don't go according to my expectation, what really startles me every time is the fact that I was so certain it was going to go a certain way that when it doesn't, I am absolutely totally thrown. An alternative didn't even enter my mind. I hear that there's a dude involved with girls volleyball and I immediately am like, all right, well, let's see how like gross this is. And they just didn't do it. And sometimes I don't know how much a trope is embedded in my brain as a given until it's not what happens. And then I suddenly stop and I go, wow, I have a lot of like predetermined expectations about many things that I don't even examine because most of the time they're upheld. And so when they're not, it can feel really fresh and exciting. And this is something that I've talked about the Cradle series on other shows. I don't know if I have on here, but the Cradle series is a book series that I was commissioned to cover and it's still running. And it's like one of my favorite series of all time at this point. And that is something that the writer does a lot. He takes things that are tropey and he twists them in a way that it like completely undermines what I was expecting. And I'm like, oh, right. I just like thought that I knew what this like hero's journey looks like. And he's just not going to quite do that. So anyway, there's this girl that works for him. I say girl, her name is Lucy. She looks like she's probably like in her late 20s and she's clearly kind of into him, but what they did was really fun is they have her sort of like longing, but also feeling like there's something really mysterious about him and she doesn't really understand him. And obviously that's mostly because he's a weird vampire, but she thinks that it's something like probably a brooding past, something that he's like, you know, and it is. He is. He's literally on the run and living a second life. So she's not wrong about the fact that like there's something in his past that he's trying to escape from kind of thing. But it's just like so not as romantic as it sounds when you know what it actually is. So yeah, we get like a little bit of an interview with Coach Swanson and she's saying how they were losing a lot. And then he showed up and he's like the X factor and their team has started to pull together and they are just working as a group a lot better. And at one point, he's showing off like the various accomplishments. So we see that this team is doing better. We see that he has now got a truck, which we find out later he cannot drive. He says that it was really expensive. Again, bringing up the money question. So very curious. And he beats up these dudes, these bikers, who it turns out are actually here on a charity run to raise money for kids. And he came out guns blazing, so to speak, and just beat the shit out of them for no reason. And even though they try to like explain what they're doing here, he is too focused on posturing for the camera as like an action figure to hear anything they're saying. And the guy that we get the like short clip of the interview, his name is listed as Wayne. I'm pretty sure that's an actor from Sons of Anarchy. I can't recall precisely, but I think it is. And if so, that's a pretty good joke. Or else he's just very typecast, but I like to think that that's like a real joke. And overall, what we have is a life that he's like not really seeming to think at all about the people that he left behind. There's no mention of Nadja. There's no mention of anything really. He is quite fulfilled and really doing okay. So we cut to a celebration that they are having at the bar because they qualified for like the state championship. And the coach is up there and she is congratulating them all, saying how like the year didn't start out so great, but we just qualified for state. What I love, again, guys, is the reminder that he was gone like a week, apparently. But he managed to like turn this team around to the point that they now qualify for state. Is it supposed to be that Nandor is just underestimating how long he was gone? Or it doesn't matter. It's just a good joke. It's fine. But this coach is doing the thing where she's like, thank you so much to everybody, especially Jackie, and so psyched that we qualify. But then she follows it up with, there were budget cuts, so we aren't going to be able to go to state. And I just could not help but be like, girl, there are much better ways for you to handle this than to wait after your big announcement congratulating them all, to then publicly share the fact that they can't go as kind of a shocker. It works out, but questionable leadership. I'm just saying, maybe there's a reason that team wasn't doing so well, coach. You may want to think things through a little bit more in the future. So he goes outside because he's so overcome with the fact that these girls are not going to get their fair shot. And we get a hilarious moment where he is talking to himself about not knowing what to do. And the girl who is in love with him, Lucy, is walking around, picking up, grabbing all the glasses and singing to herself. And she's got an extremely ordinary singing voice. Like, it's part of the joke is the fact that she isn't really anything particularly special, but he seizes on any little bit of talent and like decides to completely go for it, which I do respect. I wish I was more like that. You know, I just have standards for myself and other people that are like not really kind or generous, and it would be great if I could just be cooler about stuff. But this gives him an idea that he's going to host a talent show for raising money for the girls. And it winds up working out really well. There are two huge baskets of money that unfortunately go up in flames later. And you guys, can I just say how much that hurt? I know it's fake money, but like, you know, I just hated it. there's like a physical pain that came with seeing these two baskets of cash on fire. I was just devastated. So yeah, he goes around. I love this. He's talking about how everybody has like a talent that they can join the talent show with. And the coach, he says something to her about how she can do impressions. And she says, my wife. And he says, great. See, King Henry VIII. What? That's not even like really a joke. I loved that so much. It's so dumb, you guys. There are some really stupid jokes in this show, and they just all work really well. It's not fair. Other shows couldn't get away with this. Martin says, I just love how Laszlo just basically walks into a 90s sports movie for this episode. 100%. 100%. This kind of sports movie really has, now that you say that, Martin, I never really stopped to think about the fact that it fell out of fashion the way that it did. But yeah, we don't really do this kind of thing anymore, do we? I feel like the movie that sort of slammed the door shut behind it in terms of being so good that nobody really wanted to follow it up was Friday Night Lights. And I know they made a whole TV show out of it, and I watched a couple seasons, and it was not super memorable to me, but the movie moved me quite a bit because, spoilers, the team that you're rooting for doesn't actually win at the end, which is like one of the only movies I've ever seen that had that kind of setup, that you had a very strong expectation of how it was going to go, and they just don't give that to you. And it was a different message that sometimes you don't win. You give it everything. You work really hard and you don't win. But you also kind of did win anyway. And maybe it's not just about the game that you want to win. It's a bigger picture, which I think is a great message and something that I wish had been like pushed a little bit more. But yeah, just never really stopped to think about it, Martin. But you're right. That was kind of like a 90s, early 2000s thing. And Jan says Laszlo had a lightsaber fight with Mark Hamill. Oh my God, I didn't even think of that, but you're right. Basically. Oh my God. Okay. Well, we'll get to that. So I really do. There's a woman who tries to just walk by without taking a flyer, and he uses his like mind whammy to make her take a leaflet. The thing that he's going to do for the talent show is shadow puppets. And he does a bat and it literally flies away. It is so great. I want a lot more of weird shit like this, where he can make a perfect bat shadow puppet and then it just like takes on a life of its own. How? How did he do it? I don't know. Do I want more of that? Yes, I do. I absolutely do. So then we go back to the house in Staten Island, and they are trying to play a card game. I love Guillermo just standing there staring at the camera with this like sort of dead-eyed, why am I even here look on his face. And they're all playing with like no enthusiasm whatsoever. Colin is trying to explain the history of playing cards and like where they originally came from. And then Nandor is just basically, shut up. And he starts to make the next turn, and Nadja gets up and runs off because she's so upset. And she has a little bit of a like back and forth with the Nadja doll, which it kind of seems to go dead when Colin Robinson walks in, as if they don't want anybody to know that she can move. But then he later describes being rejected by the Nadja doll. So I think he does know something's up with it. I can't tell. But either way, what he does here is amazing. So he shares with her how she's like, he can see she's having a difficult time. Is everything okay? And he knows that she's lonely. And so what he does is try to kiss her. And I am thinking, he is genuinely making a pass. But then we get his little like moment with the camera and he says, oh no, I wasn't actually trying to kiss her. It's just the kiss rejection moment is so awkward that it is like a particularly spectacular energy to feed on. He describes it as like Thanksgiving dinner because it just gives and gives. Especially the fact that they are going to be living in the same house and seeing each other, and this awkwardness will still be between them for a little while. So that's genius. That's so good. I mean, she says, if I wasn't married and you were a completely different person. But yeah, that's when he says, I wasn't trying to kiss her, but the rejection from the Nadja doll, that really did hurt. And I can't, you guys. What does that look like? Like, we see him, like, sort of weirded out and leaning away from her. What did she say to him? I am desperate to know. I really am. So, we go back to Pennsylvania. And here comes Jim the Vampire walking in. And, of course, Laszlo assumes that this man has finally caught up with him. And then we get this fantastic scene where it turns out that his disguise has completely worked. And Jim the Vampire has no idea who he is, referencing his blue jeans and his toothpick as the things that ensure this is a regular human bartender. And it's such a good moment because it really can be read as him fucking with Laszlo and being like, of course I fucking know who you are. And describing the pathetic, like, attempt at a disguise. But actually, it's him falling for it. It's just genius. The whole way that this is acted, the way that this is written, it's so good. I love it so much. And he leaves his card, and Laszlo says, bye, Jim the Vampire, at which point he stops and turns around and says, how did you know my name? And I'm thinking, like, yeah, you fucked up, buddy. What was that? And then he holds it up and says, it's printed on your card quite clearly. And it does literally say Jim the Vampire. The idea that a vampire would just have a card that says first name, the vampire. And they would just, like, be handing that out to fucking people they think are human. I mean, why not? What are they going to do? Genuinely, what are they going to do? Like, nobody is going to call you on it. Nobody's going to think, oh my God, he's actually a vampire. And it's going to be like, oh, he made these funny business cards. Like, you know, what a goon. So yeah, he winds up leaving, and outside, Laszlo is talking to the camera saying that it was way too close a shave and that he kind of wants to bounce again, but he can't bear to do it and, like, let all these girls down. So that's when we go to the scene where they have raised all the money. We have these big baskets of dollar bills that they have collected from the crowd, and they're hauling them away in excitement. And then Jim the Vampire comes in, and they begin to fight with each other because one of the covers of a mirror gets dropped when, like, a guy passes by, and all of a sudden Jim notices that Laszlo doesn't have a shadow, and he begins to put it together. It's really remarkable. It's very good. So they begin to fight quite publicly. There's no effort put into taking this outside, hiding what's going on from the human beings whatsoever. They just have an out and out fight right here. And I should mention, before the fight actually begins, Jim is talking to Laszlo about how much he has grown to care about the girls' volleyball team. And that it's like a source of hope and like a bright spot in his life after being swindled by somebody so many years ago. So I love it when he says, "I will have 1 human alcohol beer, please." And then later, 1 human alcohol martini. So they begin fighting, and we have them with their super speed darting all over the place. They break a billiard table in half, and they finally like grab pool sticks from people and break them in half and make crosses, which I guess the point is to try and keep each other away, but it looks like the crosses only succeed in burning their own hands, which doesn't feel like a great idea. But there it is. Martin says he doesn't actually recognize it, specifically Laszlo, though, until he takes the toothpick out. Oh, really? I didn't catch because he like sits up straight and stares in shock when he sees that he doesn't have a, what do you call it? A reflection. But there's an extra beat where it's the toothpick. That's good. I missed that. My bad. So yeah, they try and do this thing where they hold the crosses up against one another. And then Laszlo says, "You're fired." And he says, "That doesn't even make any sense. I don't work for you." And Laszlo spits booze at him with a lighter, lighting the Congrats Girls banner on fire, which falls into the piles of money and lights them up. And as this is all happening, Jim the Vampire says, "Oh, fire. Now I get it." Which just, what a delightful character. I really want him to come back. Mark Hamill must have had a fucking ball doing this. I feel like Mark Hamill has had one of the funnest celebrity careers that I have followed. Like, only has seemed to ever do shit that's a complete ball. And I may be wrong about that, but everything I have ever seen him in, it just seems like he's giddy with enjoyment over it. So yeah, the two of them realize that the money is on fire, and they both try and stop it. He's like waving his cape at it like that's going to help. And Laszlo goes and tries to get the seltzer gun from behind the bar, which just has this like paltry little like and can't even reach. And the two of them sit down at the bar and talk about how this loss and them letting the girls down has sort of put everything into perspective for the two of them. And Laszlo, who says that he will pay off his debt, proceeds to still swindle this guy. What he does is pretend that this Billy Bass that's on the wall, and those of you who grew up anywhere in the early 2000s and the 90s will remember these fucking things, also featured prominently in The Sopranos. He tells Jim the Vampire that it's like this priceless thing and that it is the only one in the world, so that Jim the Vampire will accept it as payment for his debt. And I have to say, I will give Laszlo credit, because we find out later that he put in a word for Jim the Vampire to become the next like coach for the team. So now he has got some bright spots in his life and something to live for and whatnot. But so he's like paid him back somewhat in a way, but the fact that he still just wouldn't pay it, it's very in character. I will not argue with that. But Laszlo, for shame. Get your fucking wallet out, sir. You could have just sold that damn truck. The truck that you drove into a wall when you tried to escape. So, yeah. They wind up having to change the memory of everybody in the town to keep them from remembering that vampires exist. Then he burns down the bar to get the insurance money to send the girls to state. But he reflects later that there was still an employee inside. So then he had to burn down another building to pay for his funeral. It wasn't actually Lucy, the girl that was in love with him. But because he says he. But that sucks. That really does. This show does not shy away from the fact that they just murder indiscriminately. And finally, after crashing that truck in a sequence that's very, it's done so quickly that it genuinely did make me sort of jump. He presses the reverse so quickly, and he thinks it's reverse. But the slam of that truck into the wall, I really was like, oh my God. So he decides to just turn into a bat and fly home, at which point, of course, Nadja is delighted to see him and wants to immediately go to the bedroom because she's so horny. Nandor, for his part, is just like, welcome back. And he's like, man, what the fuck? How can you just be so casual about it? I've been gone for ages. And he says, I said welcome back, didn't I, fucking guy? As this is all happening, I need to point out, Nadja has his hand, and she's just licking it. She isn't even, sucking on his fingers. She's licking at his hand like she's a cat. In this incredibly unnerving sort of way. I hated it. I just really hated it. My God. So yeah, this is when they go running to the bedroom. And he says, some of Jackie Daytona's good-naturedness has rubbed off on me. And we get to see how he sets up this whole fire. I really want to know exactly how this fire, he's literally just walking around with a bunch of gas cans. I guess it did work, though. They were able to go to state. I had to set another fire to another building to pay for his funeral. And then after hypnotizing everyone into forgetting vampires even existed, I put in a good word for my friend. And we get to see this fucking dude on the sidelines coaching the girls' team with the priceless Billy Bass under one arm, which I am sure the whole town just interprets as a good luck charm because sports is just such a weirdly superstitious thing. Anything that's got the slightest element of risk to it, to be fair, is very superstitious. Because when I worked in theater, that was also, there's words that you can't say backstage, and there's rituals that people always perform before a show, or they'll put their clothing and costumes on in a certain order, or what, So this Billy Bass thing, I feel like my instinct initially was, that's weird. Nobody thinks that's weird. And then I was like, why would they think it's weird? Coaches are weird. And I feel almost as if that town, if he was carrying it and they won their game the first time and then they won the second game and he was carrying it, then everybody would pretty much be like, oh yeah, no, it's the Billy Bass. It's good luck. And that's the thing that's they would be encouraging him to have it. But he winds up dropping it on the ground in a moment of excitement. And the other coach tells him, "Those you can buy those anywhere. I'll get you another one tomorrow." And he just screams Cravensworth and shakes his fists in the air. And that is how the episode ends. And I should mention, it wasn't until maybe 5 episodes ago that I had even noticed Laszlo's last name was Cravensworth, which is hilarious. I don't remember anybody else's last names. But I had thought when I found out that was his name, That's surprising. Like, yeah, he can be kind of a shit, but I don't really ever see him being super cowardly that I can remember. Just kind of wanting to avoid things in general because he seems mostly lazy. But here, when he literally runs away from a fight and turns into a bat to escape, I was like, okay, now I see it. That makes sense. Fair. Also, though, not wanting to pay the, like, safety deposit and deciding to, like, leave and start a whole new life so that you can avoid paying that makes a lot of sense to me. I can't even be that mad about it. There is just, y'all, safety deposits are such a scam sometimes, and they certainly can be very valid. I'm not trying to say there's no reason for them, but I have lived in a lot of places that have tried some shit, and all I have to say is go ahead and take photos when you move into a place, because they will try and tell you a lot of shit was not the way that it was, when it very much was that way. And you really need to have photo evidence to prove this. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm sure Jim the Vampire is a great landlord, if only because he's so stupid that you could just fool him into thinking things were like this and you wouldn't have to deal with too much from him. But I love the idea that he has been pursuing him for 167 years. That is really quite a grudge. And the fact that he doesn't actually get paid back in the end is what gives me a tiny flicker of hope that we will get to see him again at some point. But I don't think it's just going to be like, I'm here because you need to pay me. It will probably be like, no, I'm actually here to just straight up kill you now because I hate you. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't want to leave his life with the girls volleyball team because he's so committed now. Maybe that's what it, like, he just decides, I'm not going to sacrifice it all for him to pay me back because my life is actually okay now. I hope so. I really do. I wish all the best for Jim the Vampire. So that is how the episode ends. And the next one is 7, The Return, which I do not know what is returning, but I'm pretty excited, guys, because from what I've like the vague things that I have seen, because I said earlier that like the AV Club will share stuff, and I don't try and read the headlines or look too closely at the like thumbnail image of episodes or anything like that. But the sense I get is that the feedback has been positive for season 3 as well. And it really makes me happy because, you know, sometimes things can just fall off and it can be very hard to pinpoint where the magic was in a comedy, so that if it seems like it's beginning to slip, you can actually get it back. And I was a little bit worried, like, I think that this whole storyline is rich with possibility for comedy. And I think that there are sort of endless ways that you could do it, but I could see them feeling like they were repeating themselves a little bit too much, or just, you know, that it would get tired. And the AV Club can be pretty brutal. Like, if anybody follows them on Facebook, they rarely have positive reviews of almost anything. So the fact that they have been seeming consistently pleased with the new season, that speaks highly, I think. So anyway, yeah, I am very, very excited to continue watching. Season 3 hasn't been commissioned yet, so if anybody's interested in pre-commissioning the rest of it, but you know, there's a bunch of openings coming on later on this year, so there's room to start doing that now. And Martin says season 4 is also really good. Is that what's airing now? I thought that it was season 3 that's airing now. I'm out of order then. So season 3 is completed, and did season 4, is it still airing, or is it also dropped? Because I know when this was commissioned, the second season, like, and Max decided to pay for the rest of the season, the 4th season had not yet dropped. So I just got, like, you know, turned around. Time passes without me noticing, frankly, at this point in my life. I straight up am just caught off guard by the fact that something has already happened that it felt like was years away. Season 4 just finished airing. Okay, so 2 full seasons. All right, well, if anybody wants to take that on, I would be delighted. All right, everybody, I'm going to wrap. Thank you guys again very much for coming and hanging out with me. Thank you again to Max for commissioning this, and I will be seeing you again very soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers!
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.